Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Improvement era from January 1963. And this article is entitled Nathan Eldon Tanner of the Council of the 12. There's a subtitle. It says, "We can only stretch time by stretching ourselves," and the author is by Richard L. Evans of the Council of the 12 and Doyle L. Green, managing editor. So, kind of a long title, but anyways, and Eldon Tanner. He didn't go by Nathan, he went by Eldon. I'm not sure why. Maybe he just preferred it. I don't know. What do I know about him? He was in the first presidency, which is why we're talking about him today. I know that he served with Gordon B. Hinckley for years. So I'm much more familiar with Gordon B. Hinckley since I've read his biography, but I'm less informed about a lot of the people he worked with, including an Eldon Tanner. I know he was kind of an austere-looking person. He looked kind of serious, had kind of a low eyebrows and kind of a thin face. I don't know. He gave off a very serious, impression when you looked at him. I'm not sure if he was very serious, but he sure looked it, that's for sure. This article has quite a few pictures, so I'm going to start with the pictures. But yeah, I don't know that much about his life other than he was in the first presidency. So I think I'm going to be learning a lot today. Alright, so this first picture has a caption, "Nathan Eldon Tanner as president of the Trans-Canada Pipelines Limited, speaking at the trunk line opening ceremonies, July 23rd, 1957. Yeah. A couple other pictures, Edna Brown Tanner and infant son Nathan Eldon. So that's his mother holding him. Nathan at age 4. It's still kind of a serious look, even when it's a small child, yeah? And then as a young man of 18, still looking very serious. I'm not sure if he really was, as I said, or if it's just an impression that he gave off. That's interesting. So, let's take a look at the article. So it starts out by saying the above sentence, "We can only stretch time by stretching ourselves," was written for a Sunday morning broadcast of the Tabernacle Choir some weeks ago in January 1963. So it was probably published sometime in 1962. Yeah? We recall it here in context with the life of Nathan Eldon Tanner because of a feeling he has expressed concerning himself, that his life has been largely a series of assignments for which he didn't feel fully prepared, each one of which has caused him to reach beyond himself. It is by such reaching that we grow, by having to exceed our past selves. It would seem that we are not always chosen only for what we are, but partly for what others know or believe we can become. And this man, who has received the most recent call to the Council of the 12, and who began life in what today would be considered poverty, and under primitive pioneering conditions, has reached, what? Why does it say it twice? Has reached and reached, I guess? With the help of loved ones, friends, and his Father in heaven, and by his own earnest efforts also, to become increasingly what he has reached for. That's a very strangely worded sentence. Come on, Richard L. Evans. Oh, it might have been Doyle Green. I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with their writing styles to tell them apart. This, in some essentials, characterizes the life of Eldon Tanner, and which follows from its largely biographical detail. Eldon Tanner would have succeeded wherever he was born, wherever he went. That's a weird thing to say. Elder Tanner would have succeeded wherever he was born. How do you know that? Yeah? You can't possibly know that. His family has produced staunch members of the church for 6 generations. John Tanner, his paternal great-grandfather, was a close associate of the prophet Joseph Smith. James S. Brown, his maternal great-grandfather, was a member of the Mormon Battalion and one of the very first settlers of Ogden, Utah. Okay, so he was 4th generation member of the church. That is interesting. I normally annoys me a little bit when they start talking about ancestors, but that is actually an interesting tidbit. Yeah, so his family's been in the church forever. Forever. Feels like it. Since the inception. Brother Tanner himself well knows through first-hand experiences the rigors of pioneer life. His mother and father, Edna Brown and Nathan William Tanner, soon after they were married in the Salt Lake Temple, migrated to a small Latter-day Saint colony in southern Alberta, Canada. This was a 6 weeks journey by covered wagon, and when they arrived, they were so short on funds that they were forced to sell their team of horses in order to buy necessities. Ooh, that sucks. In partnership with a brother, Eldon's father took up a homestead and made a one-room dugout in the side of a hill. This became their home. Logs were used for the side walls in front. One wall was the hill. Yeah, they did that to save on building materials, make it easier to build. The roof was of sod, and the floor was dirt. It was in this home where the family was living when the time drew near for their first child to be born. But because there were no doctors in the area, and because she wanted her son to be born back home, Elda's mother returned to Salt Lake City by wagon and train, where Eldon was born May 9th, 1898. Okay, that's legit. You wanted to go somewhere where there was a little more medical care, yeah. The mother returned to Canada when young Eldon was 6 weeks old, and the family continued to live in the dugout until they were able to build a 2-room house with an attic. Okay, well that's legit. Like, honestly, if I were about to give birth, I'm not sure I would want to give birth into a sod hut with a dirt floor. Yeah, I don't really blame her. So she stayed until she had recovered sufficiently from the birth to return back to where she lived. So 6 weeks old, that's a reasonable amount of time. I don't think that that's unreasonable at all. There's a couple of pictures. Let's pause quickly. Left top. N.E. Tanner left being sworn in as Minister of Lands and Forest Minister of Mines and Minerals in the Alberta government. Midnight, March 31st, 1949. Why did they get sworn in at midnight? That's weird, isn't it? Observing are, left to right, Mr. E.C. Manning, Premier of Alberta, Mr. J.C. Bowen, Lieutenant Governor, Mr. R.A. Anderson, Clerk of the Legislative Assembly and of the Executive Council, is administering the oath. Interesting. Left bottom, Elder Tanner with 3 of his grandsons, Merrill Walker, Jack Walker, and Jim Jensen, 1960. Okay. Center top with Mr. E.C. Manning, Premier of Alberta, Elder Tanner and others inspect drilling rig in the Turner Valley. Center bottom, Elder Tanner and Princess Elizabeth on the occasion of her visit to Calgary in November 1951. That's interesting. Far right, Elder Tanner, second from left, as president of the Trans-Canada Pipelines Limited, accepts a check for more than $81 million representing monies invested by Canadians in the pipeline. Wow, from Mr. A. D. Nesbitt. This is reported to be the largest check ever issued in Canada. Well, up to that point, right? That's crazy. Yeah. So, moving on, lots of really cool things. It looks like he had something to do with oil and lived in Canada most of his life, it looks like. I mean, that's all I got from this so far. And he seemed to be honored to, like, meet some very prominent people. So that's cool. Eldon's childhood was happy but filled with innumerable responsibilities. Ranch life, especially in those days, was hard, and boys early became men. He learned to ride a horse while still very young, and being the oldest boy in the family, he was charged with much responsibility for his younger brothers and sisters. When Eldon was but a small lad, smallpox afflicted the entire family, except Eldon and one younger brother. Gosh, that must have been really hard. No help came from the neighbors as they were afraid of the fearful disease. Well, I don't blame them. Young Eldon cared for the family night and day until all recovered. I wonder why he didn't catch it. I wonder if maybe he either had caught cowpox before, or possibly that he did catch it. It's just it was so mild for him that he never really broke out. So it wasn't obvious that he had it, yeah? I mean, it could be either one of those. Or just straight up didn't catch it, just lucky. By the time Eldon was 12, he was driving a 4-horse team, hauling grain to the elevators over deeply rutted roads, often through rain and snow, and not infrequently finding his wagon mired in the mud. That sounds fun. He has always been known to tackle forthrightly whatever job was at hand, no matter how difficult. Grain harvesting and other farm work frequently interrupted his schooling, but despite the fact that his services were sorely needed on the farm, Eldon and his parents were determined that he should have an education. Good for them. So after finishing 9 grades in the little town of Etna, he first attended high school in Cardston, and then went to the Knight Academy in Raymond and later to the Calgary Normal School. He helped earn his way. He batched part of the time. Worked at a butcher shop, a slaughter yard, and did other tasks. Batched part of the time. What the flip does that mean? I'm going to look it up. To make a group out of a number of things so they can all be dealt with together. In warehouse, several orders are batched together. Let me look it up as a profession, yeah? To batch profession. Oh, okay. Gosh. Okay. Free dictionary. Thank you. It's an idiom. To batch it. It's to live by oneself as an unwed man or bachelor does. The phrase can be batch it without the T or with the T. To live as a bachelor. Okay. Hang on, let's read it again. To help earn his way, he batched part of the time. So he lived by himself, is what he meant. What is meant, I think. It might have a different meaning from 1963, but this is my best guess, in meaning that he was living as a bachelor. Worked in a butcher shop, a slaughter yard, and did other tasks. Yeah, that would make sense. So he moved out of his family's house part-time, it looks like, yeah? When he graduated at 20 years of age from normal school in 1919, he was offered 2 teaching jobs, one at Hill Spring and the other at Rocky Ford. Even though the other paid a higher salary, he made his decision on church considerations, and so without experience, he became principal of a 3-room school at Hill Spring. It was at Hill Spring where he fell in love with one of his teachers. That sounds really creepy. Sarah Merrill, who later became his wife. A fortunate day for him and for her. They were married December 20th, 1919. Okay, so he was the principal of a 3-room school, so they had 3 teachers. And he fell in love with one of the teachers. And he was the principal. Yes? Okay, that's not quite as creepy as if he were the student. Okay. Alright. During the dedication services of the Alberta Temple, Canada, which were held on August 26th through August 29th, 1923, among those who received their endowments were Nathan Eldon and Sarah Isabel Merrill Tanner. Cool. There was no high school when he arrived in Hill Spring, so he added a year of high school each year until a full high school course was established. Well, good for him. And each year, all of his class passed the government examinations. Good. So he became accredited, yeah? His school. He introduced boxing, wrestling, and basketball as extracurricular activities, and his services were sought in counseling on the problems of young people. He became scoutmaster, trained cadets, acted as dance director, and was called upon to use his talents in many ways. While at Hill Spring, he also served as health officer and constable, and took a most active part in public affairs. He also continued his own education at summer school, and he engaged in many off-hour activities to help finance his young family, including the operation of a small farm. Some of these early teaching years were Depression years, and school teachers were poorly paid. Hence, one year they received notes instead of money. What does that mean? It was at this time that Brother Tanner began running a general store in Hill Spring, making his down payment with their only negotiable possession, a fairly new Ford car. This store handled a general line from farm machinery to pins. Finally, Brother Tanner gave up teaching and ran the store and the post office, during which time he did his own freighting by night from Lethbridge, 60 miles away, and from Cardston, 20 miles. That's really sad to me, that teaching didn't pay well enough to support his family. I mean, that's kind of a reflection of, today, Because you can't support a family on a teacher's salary anymore. Depending on where you live, of course. But, I think that's a real shame, and that is a sign that a society doesn't value education as much as they should. Yeah? So, it sounds to me like they weren't getting paid properly. And so they couldn't make ends meet based on the teacher's salary, so he had to give up teaching, and he started the store, yeah? The store made the family a living, but didn't give them the opportunities for service and growth that they desired. So they sold out with the idea of his going to the university to study law. However, after all debts were paid, his funds were very limited. Therefore, the family moved to Cardston, where Elder Tanner accepted a position as a high school teacher beginning in January 1929. So they moved to a bigger city, yeah? Okay, the following year he became principal of the public high school, which position he held until 1935. Okay, so he gave up the idea of becoming a lawyer, yeah? During these years, he had to supplement his teaching salary by selling suits and insurance and engaging in other activities. Once again, not paid enough to support his family. That stinks. That really annoys me. Elder and Sister Tanner and their young daughters from 1927, and looking at the pictures, yeah. From left to right, the children are Ruth, Beth, Zola, and Isabel, daughters. Okay, he had a lot of girls. I didn't realize he had that many daughters. Did he have any sons at all, or is just all daughters? Okay, the most recent picture of Nathan Eldon Tanner's family, the daughters are standing left to right, Mrs. W.S. Jensen, Isabel, Mrs. C.R. Walker, Ruth, Mrs. H.S. Rhodes, Zola, Mrs. G.L. Spackman, Beth, and Mrs. L. Williams, Helen. I hate that they called their daughters by their husbands' names. That really annoys me. They could have said, left to right, Isabel Jensen, Ruth Walker, Zola Rhodes, Beth Spackman, and Helen Williams, and that would have been fine. But no, they had to name them by their husbands' names. That irritates the heck out of me, but it was a sign of the times, yeah? Okay, next picture. By 1943, the Tanner girls were young women. Here are shown left to right Zola, Helen, Sister Tanner, Brother Tanner, Beth, Isabel, and Ruth. So they had 5 daughters. No sons. Interesting. Well, girls are people too, and they're beautiful women, yeah? Lovely. I like girls. I have daughters, so I'm a little biased. And I'm a woman myself. There you go. In 1935, a new political party was gaining momentum in the province of Alberta. Brother Tanner had no interest in running for political office, but after much persuasion became a candidate and was elected to the legislature on the Social Credit Party ticket. In September 1935, was named Speaker of the legislature. I always get those words mixed up. And served in that position beginning in 1936. Inasmuch as he had never attended a session of the legislature, he spent some exceedingly busy weeks acquainting himself with parliamentary procedure. Gosh, how do you get elected if you've never even attended? Like, you've never even observed what they do, and you had no idea what's going on, and they're like, hey, let's make you spokesman. Gosh, great idea. During this period, as has been true on many other occasions in his life, he was forced to reach beyond his past experience to prepare for the challenging responsibility that had come to him. Yeah, that's putting it mildly. In December of that same year, the provincial premier, Mr. Aberhart, called him at 10:30 one night and asked him to become a member of the provincial government cabinet. Geez, he could have, visited him personally and asked him. I don't know, that's a bit weird. He advised the premier that he was happy where he was and had no ambition to be in the cabinet, but after repeated requests and being encouraged by trusted friends, Elder Tanner accepted the cabinet assignment and became Minister of Lands and Mines to administer the natural resources of the vast mineral and oil-rich province of Alberta, again in a field for which he had little or no prior preparation. This sounds like a great idea. Gosh. Let's pick out the guy who was a school principal. I'm sure he knows the most about oil. You know what I mean? What the heck? And so, following the bringing in of Alberta's first oil well, Brother Tanner started immediately to organize a conservation program. He visited the oil states in the United States, Okay, so he did some research, studied their systems, and spent uncounted hours and days in conference with trained men, as well as in travel, and later introduced legislation that had become the pattern for other Canadian provinces, and other countries also, and which helped to make Alberta the only Canadian province free of public debt. Well, good for him. If he was an influence in that, I'm sure it wasn't him by himself, but that's impressive. By 1949, he was invited by the government of Barbados to go to that country and help it prepare oil and gas legislation, which invitation he accepted. He spent a full month in that country helping with their legislative program. Well, good for him. That's nice. Let's help others if we were able to get ourselves straightened out. In Alberta, he was introduced new grazing regulations, and under his administration, the general forest policies were greatly improved. He spent 8 years of strenuous work in getting the Eastern Rockies Forest Conservation Board established. He also served as chairman of the Post-War Rehabilitation Committee and chairman of the Research Council for the province of Alberta. He was chosen to head a committee representing the Dominion and provincial governments to go to Great Britain in the interest of the oil and natural gas developments in Canada. He served in this position until September of 1952, when, feeling that the work he had been asked to do was completed, he resigned. Well, good for him. Wow. So far, I admire this person a lot. It sounds like he did a lot of good in the world so far. His rapid rise in public office and in private opportunities resulted not only from his ability, but because of the quality of integrity that became synonymous with his name. He was active in scouting many years, becoming a member of the Provincial Scout Committee and finally Provincial Scout Commissioner. As a result of his long and faithful service and the responsible positions he held, he was awarded the Silver Acorn and Silver Wolf Awards, the latter being the highest honor that can be given a scouter in Canada. Well, congratulations. Through these many... That's interesting, he became involved in scouting, actually. At first I was like, well, of course he works with young people, but remember, he had 5 daughters. He didn't have any sons, which means that he didn't have a vested interest in the scouting program, since it was for boys. So that is interesting to me that that was the case. So good for him for, being... that's kind of like a selfless thing to do if you don't have a vested interest in it. Yeah, that's all I meant. Through these many activities, Elder Tanner became acquainted with and earned the respect of influential men and women of Canada and of England. He and Sister Tanner on one occasion were invited to dine with King George VI, wow, and Queen Elizabeth in Edmonton. On another occasion, they had the pleasure of dining with Queen Elizabeth. Cool. They had previously met Princess Elizabeth before she became queen and had reviewed the scouts in southern Alberta with her. Well, that's pretty cool. Lord Roe Allen, head of all scouting in the British Commonwealth, also spent several days with Elder Tanner in Alberta. While on the government assignment in England, he spent some time with the Duke of Windsor. He had met on a number of occasions with Lord Beaverbrook and other high government officials. After leaving government service, Brother Tanner moved his family to Calgary to become president of Merrill Petroleums of Canada, a newly formed oil company which, under his leadership, became an impressively successful venture. The next sentence is only halfway through, so I'm going to pause there for a second. Merrill Petroleums. Like his wife's maiden name, Merrill? Question mark? I'm assuming that it's related in some way. It sounds like nepotism there, but I'm just saying. Alright, it was while he was serving as president, continued on page 39. Alright, let's take a look at page 39. Okay, of this company, he was invited to head Trans-Canada Pipeline Limited, a company formed by a merger of 2 opposing companies to build a pipeline across Canada from Alberta to Montreal. He had no desire to leave his young and prospering oil company, and so at first refused. But after being approached by the Premier of the province, E.C. Manning, and by Mr. C.D. Howe, a leading minister of Canada, he accepted. Seems like kind of a... repeating thing that he was originally like, nah, I'm good where I am. And then people are like, oh, come on, you should do it. And he's like, all right, fine. This is not the first time. That's already at least the second time that that's happened. Knowing that this project would be most difficult and that it would again thrust him conspicuously in the public scene, he requested a 5-year termination clause in his contract. Well, that's reasonable. One of the first problems came up when he was asked to move to Toronto, as the company felt its headquarters should be near one of the large financial and population centers. But inasmuch as he had been recently appointed president of the Calgary Stake, he felt that he should not leave his church position. He also preferred to live in the West, so the company acceded to his wishes and left the headquarters of the pipeline company in Calgary. Well, that's nice. They're like, hey, can you take over this thing? And he's like, I guess. And they're like, hey, move to Toronto. I think that's a good place. And he's like, no, we're going to stay in Calgary. All right, fine. This enormous undertaking involving raising $300 million and building 2,000 miles of pipeline through 5 provinces and thereby having to negotiate with that many governments, buying the gas from many companies and selling it throughout Canada and in some areas of the United States. Yeah, it sounds like a big job. He began this grueling job, meeting unexpected as well as expected opposition from many sources. The task was so discouraging the first year that many of the personnel, thinking it was hopeless, left the company. Wow. There were also serious political repercussions, but finally construction started, and the stupendous job of finishing the line was accomplished in less than 4 years. My hat's off to you, that's amazing. By the time Brother Tanner's contract had terminated in 1959, the company was an operating success. There's a picture. It says Nathan E. Tanner as Speaker of the Alberta Legislative Assembly. Look at him all dressed up and looking all official. That's pretty cool. On December 6, 1958, the Albertan, a newspaper editorial, said of him, as architect of Alberta's eminently successful government oil and gas policy, Mr. Nathan E. Tanner won the respect and appreciation of the people of this province many years ago. As Minister of Mines, he worked out a system combining maximum returns to the public treasury with an adequate incentive for the industry. Such a policy created both the vast development of the industry and a return of hundreds of millions of dollars to the government coffers. One has only to look around for him to see the network of paid-for roads, the public buildings, and the new schools and many other projects financed directly or indirectly by this oil revenue, to appreciate the results of the policy evolved by Mr. Tanner during his years in the provincial cabinet, and followed ever since. In the eyes of other governments, it is perhaps the world's most successful oil and gas policy. Well, good for him. When a gas pipeline across Canada was being proposed and negotiated, the project was bogged down for a time by confusion and rivalry and by difficult federal government conditions. It was agreed at that time that one man in all Canada who could bring the various interests together and build a line conforming to government policy was Mr. Tanner. He was made the first president of Trans-Canada Pipelines, and it was largely under his statesmanship that the line was built. There were troubles along the way, caused mainly by the difficulty of complying with government conditions, but the line has been built and is now in operation. It is a national institution, a major force in the economy of the country, and again the chief architect has been Mr. Tanner. He has now retired as chairman of the company. We move a vote of thanks for the work he has done for Canada. Cool. Sounds like that's pretty impressive. Each decision he has made in life, great or small, has been made only after careful consideration and with the church in mind. In all of his important positions, he has been proud to identify himself as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and has engaged in unnumbered gospel conversations and has had the satisfaction of seeing some of his business acquaintances join the church. He has been unswerving in his loyalty and devotion to the principles of the gospel. From his early youth, there was never a time when Nathan Eldon Tanner was not active in the church, beginning with being president of the Deacons' Quorum. In Cardston, he became counselor to the bishop in 1932, and 2 years later was made bishop of the Cardston First Ward. On moving to Edmonton, he became president of the Edmonton branch in 1938, which position he held until September 1952. When the family moved to Edmonton in 1937, the 7 members of the family swelled the membership of the branch to 22 members. Oh gosh, that's a tiny branch. The group was meeting in a small, rented, second-story hall. During the time he was president of the branch, the first chapel in Edmonton was erected, And in addition, an institute building was built for members of the church who were attending the university. Cool. Upon moving to Calgary, Elder Tanner became a ward teacher, and has often said he enjoyed this assignment as much as any job he has had in the church. Cool. Later, he was called to the High Council in the Lethbridge stake, and on November 15, 1953, was made first president of the Calgary stake, which position he held until called to become an assistant to the Council of the 12, being set apart on October 9th, 1960. I was wondering when we would get to like general authority territory. Yeah, because they said he was stake president, but like a lot of people were stake president at the time, but he was the first one because they had just organized it. Yeah. So that's cool. Moving to Salt Lake City on February 1st, the Tanners bought a new home and were making plans to furnish it, when on February 12th he was asked to accompany President McKay and President Brown to London to attend the dedication of the new Hyde Park Chapel and to assist in the organization of new stakes in Great Britain and the Netherlands. 4 days later, he was asked to prepare to stay in London as president of the West European Mission, to be made up from the missions in the British Isles, 2 missions in France, and the Netherlands. Wow, really? Like, I don't understand, like, fusing missions unless they're very, very small. Like, I don't know. Like, that time, 1960? Were they really so tiny that they could have fused 4 missions into one? West European Mission, made up from the missions in the British Isles, 2 missions in France, and the Netherlands. That's 4 missions into one West European. That's so weird. Like, why would they do that? I don't understand why they do that. Unless the other ones are tiny, I don't understand it. So immediately the Tanners again changed their plans and canceled their orders for furniture, rugs, and draperies. That's crazy if you think about it. Like, we haven't even quite moved in yet, and now we are moving to Europe, apparently. In this European assignment, Brother Tanner has seen a great upsurge in missionary work and conversions. The 4 missions in Britain grow to 8, and with additional stakes established. Okay, so was he not a mission president then? Was he more like supervising mission presidents? Is that what it was? I'm very confused. I'm not sure what that means, but that's not how it's organized today, so He is chairman of the London Temple Committee, is responsible for passing on all building programs and proposals, is chairman and president of the board of the Deseret Enterprises Limited, and editor of the Millennial Star. His gracious and devoted companion, whom lovingly he calls Sally, in character and her name was Sarah, wasn't it? In character and competence has wonderfully and remarkably complimented the promising young man she married. They have 5 devoted daughters. Oh, now they're going to call them by their husbands' names again, yeah. Mrs. C.R. Walker, Calgary, Alberta, Ruth. Mrs. W.S. Jensen, Calgary, Alberta, Isabel. Mrs. H.S. Rhodes, Calgary, Alberta, Zola. Mrs. G.L. Spackman, Regina, Saskatchewan, Beth. And Mrs. L. Williams, Calgary, Alberta, Helen. And 22 grandchildren. That's a lot for 5 daughters, but cool. An average of 4 per. Like, that's quite impressive. Sister Tanner has helpfully stood by her husband throughout the years and has always been active in the church, serving in the Sunday School, Mutual, and Relief Society organizations, and more recently in the West European Mission. President Tanner was a member of the board of directors of the Toronto Dominion Bank, director of Consolidated Freightways Inc., Inland Cement Company Limited, the Alberta Gas Trunk Line Company, Waterous Equipment Limited, Jenkins Grosseteria, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that, Limited, and was president of Merit Oil and vice president of Grizzly Petroleums Limited. He has resigned from all these positions to devote his full time to his church callings. He has also served as president of the Canadian Gas Association in 1959 to 60, and was for a time a member of the Board of Governors of the University of Alberta. He received an honorary Doctor of Law degree from Brigham Young University in 1956. We offer in closing a personal impression of Eldon Tanner and his beloved Sally. Picture a beautiful new home on a 300-acre farm, geez, that's huge, on the outskirts of Calgary overlooking the Canadian Rockies. A home near members of the family, a result of long dreaming and planning. Then the call came to become an assistant to the Council of the 12, and out they walked, almost before the loose nap had been vacuumed from the deep new carpets. I'm not sure what that means, almost without looking back, with the comment, "It's just a home. We'll go where the call requires." That's pretty cool. This is Eldon Tanner, and this is also his Sally. He would have done well wherever he was born, wherever he went, and so would she. How do you know that? You don't know that. Okay, it's fine. President Hugh B. Brown has said of him, he is a man of outstanding executive ability, unquestioned integrity, and throughout his public career he has been known, even by his political opponents, for his rugged and undeviating honesty. He is a humble man of great faith, courage, and constancy, a devoted husband and father, and a devoted and capable church leader. Few men are chosen for high office in the church who have a richer heritage and more varied background of training and experience than Nathan Eldon Tanner. That was a long article. Feeling a touch overwhelmed by that one. Yeah, interesting. Well, the thing is, it also ended with his call to the 12, and obviously his life did not end then. So I am interested in to see what Wikipedia has to say about him. Yeah, it's not that long. So, but it's more like, interesting, because you stopped right where I was interested most into what his life was about. But obviously this was written when he was called, like shortly after his call to the 12. So that would be his life up to that time, and not post. So I'm more interested in what they missed. So let's take a look at the Wikipedia article. Nathan Eldon Tanner, May 9th, 1898 to November 27th, 1982. So there may be people here who remember listening to him speak in conference. Was a Canadian politician and leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church. He served in the Legislative Assembly of Alberta from 1935 to 1952 as a member of the Social Credit Caucus in government. Yeah, they mentioned that. He served as Speaker of the Legislative Assembly from 1936 to 1937, and as cabinet minister in the governments of William Aberhart and Ernest Manning from 1937 to 1952, in various portfolios related to resource industries. There you go. Early life. Tanner was born May 9th, 1898 in Salt Lake City, Utah, to Nathan William Tanner and Sarah Edna Brown Tanner. He had 7 younger siblings. He was the oldest of 8. It's quite a few. His family emigrated to Canada and had a farmstead in Etna, south of Cardston, Alberta, where he grew up and attended grade school. He attended high school at Knight Academy in Raymond and received some post-secondary education at Calgary Normal School. Tanner began his working life at a grocery store and butcher shop. He obtained a small teaching certificate, I'm guessing, at a small school in Hill Spring, 1919. Oh, he obtained a job teaching. Okay, got it. He met Sarah Isabel Merrill, see, told you it was Merrill, at this school, and married her on December 20th, 1919, and they became the parents of 5 daughters. Along with teaching, Tanner also established his own general store, which later also became the local post office to supplement his family income. Yeah, we mentioned that. The store was successful enough that he left his first teaching job in Hill Spring to run the store full time. Tanner eventually became a high school teacher and school principal in Cardston. He got his start in politics as a counselor on the Cardston Town Council. There you go. Political and business career. Tanner was drafted to run for a seat. See, drafted. Yeah, he was asked to do it. For a seat to the Legislative Assembly of Alberta for the first time in the 1935 general election. He ran as a social credit candidate in the electoral district of Cardston and defeated the incumbent United Farmers MLA George Stringham. After the election, and despite his complete lack of parliamentary experience, Tanner was chosen to be the 5th ever Speaker of the Alberta Legislature when the first session of the 8th Alberta Legislative Assembly began. He served in that role until January 5th, 1937, when Premier William Aberhart appointed Tanner the Minister of Lands and Mines. His time in this capacity and as legislator spanned 16 years. In the 1940 general election, Tanner defeated the independent candidate S.H. Nelson in a 2-way race. In 1944 general election, Tanner won a 3-way race. In the 1948 Alberta general election, Tanner easily won a 2-way race over the Liberal candidate Bryant Stringham to hold his seat. See, they didn't mention these details, but I actually find them fairly not interesting. So, in 1949, Ernest Manning changed Tanner's ministerial portfolio from lands and mines to lands and forests. Tanner was also appointed Minister of Mines and Minerals, and held both portfolios until his retirement from the legislature at its dissolution in 1952. In 1952, Tanner left politics and became president of Merrill Petroleums in Calgary. Told you, Merrill. I think it's related to his wife's maiden name. In 1954, Manning and Federal Minister of Trade and Industry C.D. Howe asked him to become president of Trans-Canada Pipelines Limited. Yep. During Tanner's contract of 5 years, the Trans-Canada Pipeline was built from Alberta to Montreal. Yeah, they mentioned that in detail. Yeah. LDS Church. Yay. In 1960, Tanner was called as an assistant to the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, a full-time LDS Church general authority. He had previous experience in church leadership, having served as bishop, branch president, and stake president in Canada. In the church, he preferred to be referred to as N. Eldon Tanner. In 1962, the death of George Q. Morris created a vacancy in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, which Tanner was called to fill in October 1962. He was still the Quorum's junior member 1 year later when he was called into the first presidency as second counselor to church president David O. McKay. I didn't realize he served that early on. I knew he was counselor in the first presidency under Ezra Taft Benson. I didn't realize he served under David O. McKay. That's crazy. A year after being called as an apostle. That's really fast. Really fast. There's only been a few people who were called faster. But yeah, that's really fast. Tanner remained in that position for the church presidency of Joseph Fielding Smith in 1970, and then became first counselor to Smith's successor Harold B. Lee, and later to Spencer W. Kimball until Tanner's death. Okay, my bad. It wasn't Ezra Taft Benson. My bad. He died before that. He thus served as counselor to 4 church presidents. That is impressive. While Tanner was a member of the first presidency, the membership numbers of the church grew from 1.7 million to 5 million. Imagine that. It's like more than triple. It's nearly quadruple. Like that's no, it's more like triple. Triple the numbers. That's a lot. Tanner was presented with the American Academy of Achievement's Golden Plate Award at a ceremony in 1972 in Salt Lake City. Okay, I don't know what that means, but sure. As the first presidency, Kimball, Tanner, and Marion G. Romney announced the reception of the Revelation on Priesthood in June 1978, which established that being of Black African descent would no longer be a barrier to ordination to the church's priesthood. The announcement was canonized as official declaration 2 in the church's Doctrine and Covenants. Tanner formally presented the announcement for acceptance by the church at a general conference in October 1978. Well, good for him. Not long afterwards, Tanner's health deteriorated, and it became impossible for him to continue the duties of his office. Kimball and Romney were also ailing, and the decision was made to add Gordon B. Hinckley as an additional counselor to the first presidency on July 23, 1981, with Neal A. Maxwell ordained to take Hinckley's seat in the Quorum of the 12. Okay. Tanner remained first counselor until his death, November 27, 1982, at the age of 84. Because of the appointments of Maxwell and Hinckley the prior year, no additional individuals were added to the first presidency, and no apostles were ordained as a result of his death. Yeah. Okay, that's why they mentioned that. Okay, that makes sense. That also makes sense as to why he came up so prominently when I read the biography of Gordon B. Hinckley. Because when Gordon B. Hinckley was called, he wasn't sick yet, yeah, and neither were Marion G. Romney. It was very sudden, and Gordon B. Hinckley was called, and then they got sick, like a month or two later. It was really fast afterwards, so maybe they had an inkling that something was going on wrong, but yeah, it hadn't happened yet, so... Okay. It didn't really go into depth on what he did as a general authority, though. There wasn't, like, policies that he was standing up for. The only one they mentioned was that he was the one to announce the expansion of the priesthood to Black African members of the church. which is crazy to me that it was ever denied them, but, you can't have everything. There were racist people, and Brigham Young was one of them, and there were a couple others as well who had some racial issues, and that did not allow it to happen before then. So I'm not criticizing anyone for not doing it earlier, except for the people who stopped it. But it didn't sound like, Elder Tanner was one of them. It didn't sound like he had much to do with racial issues at all until then. Yeah? Lived in Calgary. There's not a lot of racial tension in Canada. At least not where he was from. I don't think, anyway. But I found that really fascinating. I didn't realize that he was basically Canadian, although he wasn't technically born there. And his parents were both American. So he was a, first generation, sort of. Except that he was born in the U.S., which means that he probably didn't have citizenship. Although, maybe he did, I don't know. Maybe, because under certain circumstances they will let you have dual citizenship, and under other circumstances they will let you change your citizenship. So I don't know what his citizenship status was, but I do find that interesting. I'll bet his children were Canadian citizens, but it doesn't really matter. Spent a lot of time working for the good of the Canadian society, yeah? And that was kind of my point, I guess, if I had one. But, and Eldon Tanner. So it sounds I don't know if he was a super serious person. I feel like he didn't give me tons of insights into his personality. And, was he the serious person he appeared to be? Or did he just come across that way? Did he just appear that way? It's not so obvious to me right now. He definitely gave off competent vibes, or else he wouldn't have had so many important positions in his life, working in the legislature, I can never get that word right, or the, cabinet, and, different committees and things like that, in this scouting program, presented with awards, it seems like he had a lot to do, working in Barbados and, teaching the government how to build up their oil program. So it looks to me like he was a person who tried his best to be good at whatever he did. That's the impression that I'm getting. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been asked to continue to do more and continue to do more and continue to do more. He was called, for example, as a stake president. And then he was called to be an assistant to the 12. And then he was called to be a quorum of the 12. And then immediately asked to be in the first presidency. He was just moved up the ranks because he must have been very competent, very good at his job. At whatever it was. He just put his heart and soul into work, so it sounds a little bit like a workaholic. I will throw that out there. Workaholic? Question mark. Maybe. Had 5 daughters. He seems like an important person. An important person who did a lot. So, respect to him for all of that he did, which seems like a lot. But I do feel like I am missing a little bit of more insights into his personality, which I am a little sad about, but you can't have everything in life, right? But that article was quite long, so it doesn't need to be longer than that. Yeah. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that and you learned a little bit about it. If you do know more about his personality, please write it in the comments below. I am interested in any insights you can give me. And if you did enjoy that, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.